Today, for Memorial Day, we spoke with someone who is needed now more than ever, really, America's peace mom, Cindy Sheehan. Cindy, thank you for sharing your time with us. Given your work, particularly Memorial Day is, a day we wanted to speak with you. And also, I know that it was Casey's birthday, and I want to get your thoughts on the whole ritual around this and what you think about it in general.
Well, I never thought too much about it before Casey was killed. And Memorial Day, I'm saying, it was just a day off. And sometimes we would get together with friends and family, but most of the time, it's just a day for people to catch up on their chores and shopping and things like that. Because, finally, many workers have the day off. But after Casey was killed, it took on a new meaning to me. And Casey was born on May 29th, 1979, which on that year, he was born like an hour past Memorial Day because he was born, at 1:01 a.m. But most people still think, until you go to bed, you're in the same day, if that makes sense or whatever. So, there's been like this thing in my family that he was born on Memorial Day, not technically, but, in the zeitgeist of the way humans think, then yes, he was. But so every 6 years, Memorial Day falls on his birthday. And so it's a double whammy for me. And I go up to the cemetery and bring him flowers. And it always really irritates me, if not just outright angers me, that the cemetery is filled with flags and, these, like I said, gross displays of patriotism, support the troops. But when they come home, if they come home, treat them like crap, reduce their benefits, make it very hard for them to access veterans' benefits and kind of discard them. And we know that a big proportion of people living on the streets are veterans. A big proportion of people that are addicted to drugs are veterans. There was a statistic where 8 Afghan veterans a day attempt suicide if they aren't successful at it. Right. And we know since Vietnam, more people who were forced to participate in that war have killed themselves than were actually killed in Vietnam. So,
and that was 55,000. So
right.
You got more than that. And that doesn't count. You mentioned the drug abuse, the people that slowly killed themselves by anesthetizing themselves for 5 or 10 or 20 years and finally dying.
Right. And you're right. Those are never counted into the statistics. So I think that the way the United States exploits the troops and then discards the troops, we hear all about the exploitation. I mean, the glorification of the troops, but we don't hear about the exploitation or, the discarding them after their service to the oil companies, to the banks, to money laundering, to, drug selling, and, everything that the United States military does around the world is to support nefarious agendas of corporations or, the CIA and their drug selling program. And I'm not even being hyperbolic or a conspiracy theorist on this. This is what the U.S. troops have rarely defended this country. They are used for, like Smedley Butler said, to be, thugs for capitalism.
Yeah, the closest this country's come to being attacked since 1900 is the attack on Hawaii, which was a colony of the United States at the time, actually. And so in terms of defending the country, none of it's been in defense of the country, really, for, more than 100 years.
Right. And, we can go into the Spanish American War and, how that was yellow journalism,
Yep.
kind of same as it always been. The moneyed interest exploit real events to get us where we are. And we know that the so-called sinking of the Maine for to precipitate the Spanish American War is like 9/11.
Right. That's right.
So.
One of the things that interests me about Memorial Day in particular, if you look at the repurposing of holidays that's accompanied like both a grappling, an honest grappling with our history, but also an awful lot of symbolic nonsense, wokeism and whatnot, around, say, Thanksgiving, now Indigenous Peoples Day, Columbus Day, these things. One holiday they never redefine is Memorial Day, because, for example, Memorial Day could instead be War Criminals Day or a Disarmament Day. And these are things that for some reason never get suggested anywhere in the public sphere at all.
No, of course not. And because the United States economy relies on the military industrial complex. And one thing that I've learned since Casey was killed was that here in the United States, not one person lives more than 50 miles away from a war profiteer, a recruiting station, a military base, or any other thing that is dedicated to the military industrial complex. So it's pervasive. And so we say, okay, let's go lobby Congress. Every single congressperson has a war profiteer or some kind of a military base or something that employs many, many people in his or her district. So of course they're not going to cut up their noses to spite their faces. And right. So this is why we have like Don is like, okay, well, this time you can vote against it. But next time you have to vote for it. This is how those whips play that game to keep the war machine going. And this absolute atrocity that's happening in Ukraine seems to be nothing but a big money laundering scheme, sending all kinds of weapons and our money that could be best used here to support veterans, to support families, to support infrastructure. It's being literally sucked into this cesspool in Ukraine, and then it's going out not to help Ukrainians, but on the black market, and like I said, for money laundering. And so if people listening were like, oh, we're against Iraq, we don't believe that the United States going into Iraq is for spreading freedom and democracy, you have to consider that when you're like putting Ukrainian flags on your profile pictures, because it's the exact same damn thing that's happening in Ukraine.
Except the Iraqis didn't have swastikas, tattoos, and stuff, which is even worse.
Right, it's absolutely worse. Everybody in the social media now, this is kind of off subject, but it's really not. They're all castigating Roger Waters of Pink Floyd because they're saying, oh, he wore a Nazi uniform, when they're supporting literal Nazis in Ukraine. It just is absolutely. And another thing is Saddam Hussein did not have weapons of mass destruction. He did not have nukes or access to nukes like Ukraine does. That's and right. Like NATO does.
Yep, and he wasn't a threat to anybody. Maybe Iran, and they were able to manage that themselves. If we had left it alone, they would have managed it even better. All right. Well, I'll leave you to your thoughts today, and thank you for sharing with us. And, hopefully things will improve from the work. You do so much work, so much good, and hopefully we're going to see that bear fruit at some point.
Well, thanks, Don. Thank you for having me on today.
Thank you. For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.